I just sent the link of the project we're going to build. You have the instructions over here. And Costa sent the GitHub repository. These are the Figma designs also, if you want, but we're not going to focus so much on the design today. We already have a functioning HTML file, but we're going to start by making a basic version work, and then depending on the questions we get and how much time we have, we can improve it. So yeah, I'm going to close this then, keep the instructions. We will be working with the exchange rate API, and I created a demo account now, so you see my API key. I'm gonna rotate this after the video, so if you watch this on YouTube later, you will not be able to use it, of course. You can create a free account. You don't need to enter any credit card details, and there will be a variable in the code. You just have to replace it with your own API key, and things will just work. And yeah, I already cloned the repository, and the repository contains HTML folder, beginner folder, and then home.html and converter.html. And I just added the home.js and converter.js files. We will link them in a second. And moreover, I also ran npx http server, and I disabled the cache, -c-1, -1 seconds, that disables the cache. And that allows me to open the browser, preview it in localhost 8080. You can also use Vite. It's probably way better to use Vite, but I wanted to not have any dependencies in this package, in this demo. So it's pretty cool. And yeah, so what are we building? We are actually, I do need to go back to the Figma designs. We're building a basic currency conversion app that we're doing the beginner version, and the beginner version has hard-coded currencies. For example, USD, Euro, Canadian dollars, and you select the base currency, and then you select the target one. You click on track exchange rate, and it redirects you to another page. And on that other page, you will see the value, the rate of these two currencies. It's super simple, but with that, we will be able to use the DOM APIs, the fetch API, and just some generic JavaScript. And we'll see from there how much time you have and what kind of questions you have as we can improve it. All right, so let's go back to the project over here. I'm going to open the home.html and home.js, and now we can close the sidebar. And if I save here, these two files are not linked yet, so I'm going to go to the HTML and link them together. I'm going to add a script, and you might be surprised adding script in the head, but if we give it a type module, which allows us to use import and export syntax, or allows us to use to not pollute the window object with all the variables, you can actually safely put it in the head because the browser will know about it, fetch it early on, and it's not going to block the rendering of the page. And then we will link to it home.js. Now, if I go back to the browser, reload the page, we see that these two files are linked. Great. So the first thing we want to do on this page is we want to allow the user to click to select one of these three options, and then select a target, and then click on the button that will take them to the other page. The other page is converter.html. This is all hard-coded now, and we're going to make it more dynamic. So I'm going to start by inspecting this element here, and you will see these three elements all have the currency-button class. And the first one has the class selected, and the selected is what makes it highlighted. So if I remove selected, and I add it over here, you can also click on the .cls and add selected. This is how we select one of the currencies. This is not the best HTML in terms of accessibility. So please keep in mind, it's probably best to use a button, 3 buttons, and then use the ARIA properties to make it look like a button group, I think. But we're just going to focus on JavaScript from now, but it's important to know that it's not really ideal. Maybe you can blame ChatGPT. But anyway, so yeah. So let's go back to the HTML, and we will start with having no element selected yet. We want to allow the user to select an element, to select a currency. So we remove the selected class. And you see, these are the base currencies, and these are the target currencies. And I want to be able to select only these 3 elements, but they all have the same class. So we can go to this parent here and say this is the base currencies, and this is the target currencies. And now we can select the options, for example, const options or base options equals, and we use document.query selector all. Is the autocomplete annoying, or is it
no,
okay?
It's fine. Yep.
Okay.
No problem.
Cool. So apparently I don't really get, maybe if I close it, I don't get notifications if someone sends a message. So if someone has a
We'll
question,
let you know.
let me
Yeah.
know. Okay, cool. So, and then we want to look at the class that's going to be first base currencies. And then we will look for the children currency button. So dot for the class, base currencies, and then dot currency button. And the first thing I would do when giving like this kind of workshop, we would want to log it, just make sure we didn't make any typos, any mistakes. It also helps always a lot to visualize what your variable is. So we get a node list. We get a node list, which is a collection of HTML elements, and we have the first element here. So look, if you have 3 elements, but if you place your cursor on top of the div, you can see where it highlights on the page. So this first one, second one, third one, which is great. Now for each of this button, we want to add an event listener. So when you click on the US, we want to add selected. When you click on Euro, we want to add selected. So that's where we can do here a dot for each. And then we will get one currency, for example, or one item. And I'm using the arrow syntax here, but you can also use a normal function, whatever you prefer. And then we will use the add event listener, and then add the click event listener. So when the user clicks on it, then we get the callback. Am I going too fast in terms of concepts? Because I don't really know the level of the attendees.
Yeah, feel free to let us know. So if you want us to slow down, or if you have questions, please.
And what about everyone joining from the room? Do they have a way to communicate? Maybe I should ask Abed.
Abed, are we going good enough, like, for you? Do you want us to slow down? I don't know.
I'd say it's good enough.
Okay. Cool. Okay, and once again, we can console log the item just to visualize the for each here. That's going to log every one of the 3 buttons. And we have, oh yeah, sorry, this is the event listener. So we can say then console log, can also pass the event target here. Sorry, the event. Question for me, maybe you can split the window. Yeah, okay, so we don't have to jump a lot. It's a good idea. But with such a big zoom level, I think it's going to be tricky. Let's see. Yeah, it's just the zoom level is really big. Can I maybe zoom out a bit while while retaining?
Right. Is it like 2 levels smaller now, or was it,
just one, but it's a big difference.
Yeah.
Is that still visible?
I think that looks good. I mean, anyone, please feel free to comment on that.
So yeah, we select the base options. We iterate over each one of them. And then for each item, we add a click event listener. And then once we click on it, we can access the event.current target, which really just shows us which element was clicked. Scroll down. If I click on the CAD, reload. If I click on the CAD one, we get that element that we clicked on. And that's why we can now use the class list object, and then we can either toggle the class or we can add it. I'm going to start by just adding the class selected. And take a look, reload the page, click on CAD. CAD is selected, pretty cool. But now you can select multiple currencies, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. So how do we deal with that? Well, we can before we add selected to the one that we clicked on, we can go ahead and disable all of the other ones, or all the other one. There should be only one other. So I select CAD, and before I apply selected, I remove the selected if it exists, but it doesn't exist. And now when I click on USD, we remove the selected from CAD, and then we add it to USD. So we can do that with a document query selector here. So only when we click, we want to query the DOM and ask, are there any base currencies or currency button that also have the class selected? And you see here, I did not add a space character because this means this is one element that has both classes. We can save it like exist. That's kind of the long way. If it exists, then we do exist.classlist.remove selected, but of course there's a shorter way. So we look if there are previously selected elements. If we find one, we remove it, reload the page, and that already works. And maybe I got a bit ahead of myself with the if condition, but look, without the if condition, this is gonna break, I think. I hope. Yeah, it's gonna break for the first one because, yeah, and then for all of them because there is no element that has this selected, so it's gonna fail. But luckily with the new optional chaining, we can, yeah, so let's go back to this. This is without creating the intermediary variable. So select the element that is selected and then remove the class. This is still gonna fail. And now what we can do is we can do optional chaining, which means if this returns undefined, we are gonna short circuit and quit this this statement. So we don't run the class list. So we don't run class list on undefined. And that saves us an if condition. And that's why this now works. And I do want to say I got a bit ahead of myself here because if I remove base currencies, just to show you what the problem would be. Yeah, it works, but it's also, you can select one per base and target, which doesn't really make sense. But we ideally want to have the same, we want to select one base and then one target, but now we can only select one for all the 6. That's why I went ahead and I added this base currencies here and target currencies here. So I'm going to undo the code. And yeah, we now have the part where we select the base currency and we want to do the same for the target. But does anyone have any questions so far? I think it takes people a while to get to the podium, ask a question. Okay.
What's the name of this operator again? So the question mark, so I can share a link later on to a reference.
Yeah. It's the optional chaining.
Optional chaining, yeah.
Should I send it on the chat?
No, I will
okay.
just Google and
okay. And yeah, now we want to do the same for the target, and I'm gonna do something very ugly, which is copy this. But I also really want to show you that this is generally how we code. We do the duplication, and then we realize like, okay, we need to fix something about this code, because copying code and pasting it, and look how much we're gonna change to make it work for the target. We're gonna change the variable to target, and then we're gonna change this dot base currencies to dot target currencies, and the rest of the code stays the same, which is pretty cool. Reload the page, and now we can select a target currency. And look, I select USD as a target, and I can select another one as base, and they don't interfere with each other because they are being scoped to this dot target currencies. So this works now, but we have a pretty massive duplication, and we think in general that these two will always have the same behavior. So what we can do now is we can remove this variable because we never use it, and remove this variable because we also never use it. And since they are very similar, but only this changes, we can wrap it in a function. Then we can say init selector, for example. And these two parts are changing. So we will we want to have a variable here that represents it. So let's say selector. So we want to pass a CSS selector. So let's call it CSS selector, and we want to interpolate it here. So I don't know if you're familiar with interpolation, but I'm gonna make a quick example here. If you have a const age equals 2020, and you have a string that says your age is, and we want to have the value of the variable age here, but the value, so not AGE. We could do it previously by having a string, your age is, and then plus, but there's a more modern way, in a way, which is using the backticks. So you have to use the backtick character. I actually don't know where it is on the Greek keyboards. So if Kostas, you can tell us, because on normal keyboards, it's above the tab. On Dutch keyboards, it's above the control.
That's where I also see it. So I think we got the same position on the keyboard.
Cool. Okay. So your age is, and then we use a $sign, curly braces, and then we can basically have any expression here. So we can have 1+1. We can have a function call, but you can also reference a variable, and then you have your age is 20. So we're going to do the same thing over here and have the space currency being $ curly braces and then CSS selector. But it seems that this is not going to work. That's always useful to use a proper text editor. It's not really highlighting it. You get used to these highlightings, and that's because I'm using double quotes. So you only use a backtick. So this interpolation only works with backticks for backwards compatibility reasons. And yeah, now this, I can say const CSS selector, or let's do function. No, yeah, const CSS selector equals, let's say, base currencies. And now look, this is our selector. We interpolate the variable here, and we get this one. And we do it one more time over here. CSS selector, and we change it to a backtick. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We now have this function, so we can delete this. And if I reload the page, is that a question? I can't find the backtick on a Mac.
Sorry, that wasn't. It should be Pablos. I'm also on the Mac is on the bottom left. So I just realized I'm looking at my external keyboard. On the Mac, it's next to on the left of the Z. So,
it's like Dutch keyboard sound. Yeah, so it's exactly like this. It's here. 1 sec. Yeah. It's the same button as the tilde.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. So now it doesn't work because we just have a function definition called init selector, and now we just call it twice, init selector, and then we call it for the base currencies. Reload the page, and it works for the base currencies. It doesn't work for the other one because we did not initiate it, so we can do the same, init selector, and then target currencies. Reload the page, and yeah, it works. So I really wanted to show you this. I don't know what we can call it. A recommendation is a simpler way. Like, always try to start making things work. Start by making it work, and then make it better. I got this from my mentor maybe like 10 years ago, and it's really a good piece of advice. So it is really okay to duplicate code as long as you know that eventually you want to refactor it. So try to make things work and then try to make them better. It's really a good recommendation.
Also, one thing I want to know, if you scroll a little bit up on your code in your now, okay, you removed like the variables, but
yeah, we didn't
it's really
use
important to use like you're using really good names. So you use like base currencies and target currencies, not things like BC or target C or something like. So make it readable, make it self-descriptive. Don't use variable or class names like B, A, B, C, whatever. It's not going to make your life easier. Actually, on the contrary, it's going to make your life harder and also your colleagues. So good class names and also good variable names. The variables that you were using earlier, they use the plural word, the plural noun, because it was an array. So you used the base, I don't remember the name, but you use plural because there were like a lot of elements. So that's also a good tip. Like when you have a variable that store one thing, give it a singular noun, like person, profile, product, whatever. If you use an array, use the plural, products, persons, profiles. So also pay attention to these kind of things as Jad codes. So yep.
Yeah, indeed. So document.query selector all returns a node list. I think we should talk more about the node list, or is it something you covered intensely?
I mean, we can make a brief.
Okay. So the document.query selector all, and we select, let's say, currency button. So we get 6 of them. It's not really an array. It's called a node list. It is similar to an array because you can call for each on it. And you can access elements by index, 0, 1, 2, but you cannot call .map on it. So it's really not an array in that sense. And that's why it has another name. And just as a quick note, you can convert it to an array using the spread operator with a ... here. Sorry, I'm hitting too many buttons. So yeah, that's how you convert it to an array, and that could be useful if you want to use like a filter. And then you have an item, and you want to check if the item has the class, for example, selected. This is going to loop through all the buttons and give you the 1 or more, 0 or more that have the class selected. Yeah, .contains. So .class list is not a function, it's .contains. And you can see you get an array of the item that has the class selected. But that's just a sidebar. We will not use all of that today. So let's go back. And now we're almost done with this page, actually. We allow the user to select a currency. And at the moment, they can select the same currency, and it's okay. I just want to make the whole project work, and then we will iron out all the UX and UI bugs. Because this is not going to break the API. If you select the same currency twice, you'll get a conversion rate of 1, which is pretty acceptable. So yeah, now when we click on track exchange rate, we want to redirect the user to converter.html, but we also want to pass in those data in the URLs. We want to say the base currency equals, for example, USD, and the target is equals to CAD. Because from that other page, we can read them and talk to the API. So how do we do that? We have a button, track exchange rate. Sorry. Yes, here. And yeah, again, ideally, these would probably be inputs, actually, or buttons. I haven't really given that a thought. But in our case, there's no form. It's just a button here. So we want to give it an ID to, it's quite a unique button. We don't expect to find more than one track button. So I will say convert or track button. We want to select it. So we can now select this button, const button, close document.query selector, or we don't really need the variable. And then ID, track button. And again, we add an event listener on click. I think, yeah, okay. And then we can add a console log, or we can add an alert, clicked to test it out, reload the page. So yeah, you see I add console logs a lot now. Like if I'm coding, I would add a little bit less, but I still do add a lot of alerts on console logs. So depending on your pace, there's an amount of code you can write before you think it might break or you lose track of it in your head. But it's really a good way to get used to adding console logs and alerts. So now we know what's going on. If I click on it, okay, we know this piece of code is working. But if you write 20 lines and you already made a mistake in the second line, that's going to be probably hard to find later on. And now we want to just construct a URL, let's say const URL that we will redirect to. And we will console log it just to see if it's correct. So what will the URL be? It will be converter.html, question mark. Actually, there might be, yeah, let's add a to-do list here, to-do item. I think there's another way to construct this with the URL API. We can try it later on. For now, refactor to new URL. Okay. So converter.html, and then we will add the base equals something, and the target equals something. How do we get the value of the base? We need to select the .base currencies. So here we want to look for, we want to look for the currency button that has the class selected that is inside base currencies. So we can do const base equals, so actually now I realize that maybe this is too much, so I'll just make sure that the base is correct. So document.query selector .base currencies, then we look for the currency button .selector. So this is actually the same selector as this one here, the one that removes the previously selected one. Okay, let's go over here and let's console log the element, but that's gonna give us really an element, not the text. And click. Yeah, it gives us this element, but we don't really want CAD dash Canadian dollar. We just want CAD. We don't want the flag. And why do I say this? Because that's how the API works here. If I click on USD, they just need USD. If I write it in lowercase, that's also acceptable. But we don't want Canadian. We don't want an emoji. So there's multiple ways to fix that. I'm gonna use a method called datasets. So in the HTML here, I can encode extra value that is hidden from the user. So data-value. And this actually has an interesting historical story that, we can, if you use value that has special meaning in HTML, it doesn't really have any special meaning on divs, but let's say in 10 years from now, it might have a special meaning, and then your code would break. So to separate user-created variables from browser-created attributes and properties, they created the dataset object, which is, or the dataset, the dataset. So you can write data dash, and this is your own value. The browser will never use it, so you can call it whatever you want. So data dash value. Sorry.
Can you write like two more custom data properties so we can get the idea?
Like data dash emoji, for example.
Yeah. I mean, just
so
to give the point that we can add more than one, and the prefix stays the same, data dash, and we can put anything after the data dash. So that's kind of like the convention. So indeed, you can use as many as you like. That's the point. And with meaningful names, of course. Thanks.
Yes, and one more here. That's a clipboard manager, by the way. I'm so used to using it, so sometimes I have to really not use these things in live codes. So USD, Euro, CAD, we will not use the emoji for now, but maybe we find a use case for it. And now the question is, how do we read those? And I'm gonna show you a DevTools trick at the same time.
Before we move on, shall we make like a short pause here for questions?
Yes.
We covered quite a lot, so please, people, let us know if you have any questions. Like, this is all about asking questions and explaining what might be new to you. So let's pause for a few seconds and see whether there are any questions. I'm also keeping track of every single thing, term or concept or JavaScript thing that Jad is using. So later on in the video, I will put every single one of them as an MDN resource. So one of the best resources out there is the Mozilla Developer Network. So for the dataset, the template literals, like the optional chaining, you will find all these resources on the video. So you can go and check each one of them in detail.
The bit of self-advertising, but I think for these kind of use cases, I actually built this when I was teaching at Summer Coding Bootcamp. If you want, MDN is great, of course, for documentation. If you just want a very simple example of these features, you can also like the interpolation. Here's a very simple example of it. Dataset, actually, data attributes. That's another one. That might be useful. I'm gonna send one link.
Yeah, sure.
It of course doesn't contain everything, but they were made really for pedagogical use cases.
Great.
Are we sure people can ask questions if they want to? mostly in Athens with Abed. Yes, Mary, please go ahead.
Okay, I want to ask, when you say that data set properties, browser are not going to use it, what does this mean?
So yeah, in the future, the browser will never have something called data-value. So this namespace is reserved for you as a developer. They would never have conflict. So it's actually a good question. Let's say I give this div an emoji here. So let's say we did not use data attributes and I give it just an emoji. And yeah, I don't know, in 5 years, Apple or Google launches a new attribute called emoji. Then it's going to conflict with your own implementation of emoji because we're going to use it in JavaScript. So to avoid this, because no one knows what kind of attributes will come in the future. For example, browsers recently shipped the inert attribute, the pop over stuff. So to avoid this conflict, they just tell you if it's something only for you, that's not a browser feature, use the data dash and they will not conflict because the browser will never ship a data dash feature. Okay, cool. Right, that's USD. Okay, cool. Now let's go back to, yeah, how do we read this in JavaScript? Because that's the important part. We're passing it from the HTML to the JavaScript. And now we can go back here. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you a DevTools trick. Is if I select this element, now it's selected over here. I can go to the console and I don't have to select it again. I can just write $0 and $0 is going to give me the element that was selected with a mouse or with a keyboard in the elements panel. So if I go back here, select this one, now this is $0. It's just a useful debugging tip. This does not work in your code editor. It's only in DevTools. And now look, if I do the text content, so this is similar to document.querySelector in that case for that specific element. I think that you will not find an MDN page for, but maybe a DevTools page. And now if you do $0, the text content, we get the euro thing. But if we we don't really want all of that, we just want euro. So we can get it from the value, and it's not .value, it's .dataset. And this gives you an object that contains all the dataset, all the data dash attributes that you've provided. And we have the emoji, so we can read the .emoji, but that's not what we want. We want the value, and that's value. Or we can call it code. Yeah, we can call it code, like currency code. So yeah, actually, I'll show you one more thing. Hope it's not a big detour, but if I call it data-currency-code, currency-code, so that's, I think, called kebab case. It's going to be camo cased. So now I select this again, go to $0, and see it automatically converts it to currency code with a lowercase c. So yeah, camo case, not upper camo case. So that's pretty cool. Okay, now let's go back and use those data sets for the base variable. Yeah, so here .dataset and you never get autocomplete for this because TypeScript doesn't know, or just, yeah, TypeScript doesn't really know what kind of data attributes you have. So dataset what's it called, currency code. And we can test this, select euro, track, and we get euro. And now we do the same thing for the target. And these two, yeah, these three changes actually. Target, so sorry, I did this quickly. This one, and the console log. But you will see it will not work because, because we did select one. Actually, I'm surprised. Oh yeah, we get undefined. Why do we get undefined? Because we did not add these data-currency to the target one, so we also have to add them. So I'm gonna copy the whole thing. But this is generally HTML code that gets generated by your backend, or in this case, we only have 3 and 3, so we can just copy paste it. So yeah, select USD, select euro, crack, and we are console logging the second one. So this is working, which is why we can now put them over here, and we do base and dollar curly braces target, and look how beautiful it is. Yeah, and whenever you have this kind of code, you really know that there's one thing that happened. You either use single quotes or double quotes. You want to use backticks. And then reload the page and try again. And that works.
Can I add like a small
please.
comment in your code that I think it's going to be very
Yeah.
interesting to try? So now that we have like two variables, base and target, that contain the currency code, I think it's very easy to check whether they're the same, so you don't get redirected. So probably to do comment, check if base and target are the same, and alert or stop there, or
I would say it's not a big deal though. USD is okay, because look, what's the problem now is this. This is if we don't select both of them. Yeah, you're totally right, but I do want to keep allowing them for now just to select the same, because you can see that it will actually give you one from the API, which I think is cool. But you're right, I'm going to keep it here, are the same, and to make sure the user has selected both. And this is not fixable by the optional chaining. I mean, yes, you get rid of the JavaScript error, but the URL is now undefined, which is not a good idea. So let's keep these two errors, and yeah, and finalize this page and do the fetch, because I think we are gonna only make it on time. But yeah, so that's a really good idea to keep the to-dos, the improvements. Okay, and now the last thing we can do is window.location.href equals URL. And that's going to redirect us to the converter.html page. Let's give it a try. USD, euro, and we are going to this page, which has, it's probably too small for you to read. Yeah, it's going to localhost 8080 converter.html, and the base and the target are being passed off there. So we officially finished this page, a basic version of it. Does anyone have any questions? Nice. Thanks for the link, Kostas. And to give you an overview of what we're going to do next, we are going to, yeah, this is the converter page. We are now going to read the base and the target from the URL. So we send them, and then from there, we're going to read them. And then we are going to use the exchange rate API, which I think is the most exciting thing of this. And then we're going to show the value over here. Sorry, actually over here. And then if we have time, we really need to manage this, and all the text, because this is all static, and maybe fix some of these, but I think we will not have time to do everything. So now let's go to the converter page. So we have converter.html, converter.css. If I console log converter page, I think they are not linked. So reload, they are not linked together. So I go back again and add a script type module converter.js. Reload the page, and now yes, they are linked. And yeah, we can close the HTML for now. We want a way to read this URL. There's all sorts of hacks you can do, but there's also a really cool way, which I also think is on Code2Go, URL params. Yeah, you can, I'll just hide it for now. You can do, I don't know if I have it top of my head, you can do a new URL, this object, document.location.href, and we console log this URL. Yeah, so this is an object in JavaScript that gives you the information about this URL, or about any URL. So I can give it any other constructed URL, which I wanted to use actually in the other one as a to-do. And now look here, we have the search query, but that's not very helpful. To have the search params object, and it knows that there's two objects, the base and the target. So we can do search params dot get, and then we want to get the base, and that's gonna really just give you the base USD. Pretty cool, right? That's the example here. Depending on the URL, you can read the URL search parameter. So we can save this in base and do the same for target. And now with just these 3 lines of code, we can do base, and we can have the base and the target.
Can I ask something?
Please, yes.
So if you go back to the HTML of this page, you use the script tag at the top, at the head with the type module. So my question is, like, do we need some way to inside the JavaScript so that JavaScript waits for the DOM to get loaded in this case, so that it when it tries to access some document element, we know that it's there? Is there some check that we need to do, or does the type module make sure that everything is loaded when we try to, let's say, document query something?
Very good question. We probably need to wrap stuff with DOM content loaded, but I think for you to really experience that problem, you would have to have a massive HTML file of maybe 1 megabyte. I think theoretical, I've never had to deal with it. Thing is, I only put it at the top just for the preload scanner of the browser to discover it quickly. But I would never put it at the top without script type module, because that's going to block the rendering, and that's really bad. But like this, it will be discovered quickly. So there's actually 2 ways. If you want to opt for the safer way, you can put it at the end of the body. But I think when we teach, it's kind of weird for people. Why do we have to put it just 1 before the close of the body? And to help the preload scanner to read it quicker, you can add a link rel preload, and then converter.js. I haven't written this manual in a while. As script. Yeah, it was not used. And it's nice that, yeah, the browser tells you why. You also need to add cross-origin. Cross-origin anonymous, right? Yeah, and that works. But that's a bit, I think, more complicated, which is why I really like the other one. But you're right. It's probably safer to wrap everything in document.query, sorry, document.add event listener, DOM content loaded. Or just put it at the end, whatever you prefer. Of course, for this kind of small script, a small page, it doesn't really matter. You can just put it blocking at the end, and it will not be a big deal. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we have the base and the target, so we can just go ahead and fetch the exchange rate difference. Now, there's 2 ways you can do that. You can either pass in the base here, currency, and you get a list of all the other ones. If we search for CAD, we have it here. If we search for EUR, we also have it. But there's also another one that you can find in the documentation. If you go to docs, there's really 2 main APIs. Also on the free plan, which we're at now, it's the pair conversion. And for the pair, you pass in a base and a target. And that's kind of easier to use, I think. It's this one over here, pair. So let's copy it. Let's do const URL equals, I'm going to go with the backticks from the start because we know we're going to change it. The get means this is the method that we're going to use. It's going to be a get, not a post. And we want to change the euro and the GBP, but you know what? I always love to do that. Let's start with a hard-coded. Let's start with always euro GBP just to make it work, and then we interpolate, because if we try to do too many things, that's going to be confusing. So let's call this base URL. And now we will go back to Exchange Rate API. We need to have our API key, and it's clearly visible here. So const API key. When I share my code, I will most likely remove this, but whether I remove it or not, it's not going to work anymore afterwards. So make sure to sign in and get your own. And now we will need to interpolate it here, your API key. So we remove this and we interpolate it. Let's call it just key. And you can console log the base URL and reload the page. Oh, yeah, the small, yes. And this is the URL here. And look, if I click on it, this API allows you to just click on it and see the result, which is pretty cool. We get the result, success, base target, and the conversion rate. Now let's go ahead then and interpolate the euro to the base and the GBP to the target. Reload the page. And the rate should be 0.8, I think. Yeah, 0.89. To verify that it really works, you can flip them. But yeah, no, it's actually like we know it's already working. There's no need to. So now we want to do this request, where I click on it, it opens a new page, and we read the data. We want to do this programmatically. For that, we want to use the fetch API. I think I could spend a whole hour on the fetch API. I will assume that you've worked with it. Is that correct, Kostas?
I think we can move on. If you have any questions, please let us know, or we can maybe briefly mention what it does, and I can share a link to the MDN article later on if you want to dive into a fetch API.
So yeah, we have this URL, and we want to just fetch it. We want to think about it, open it in a new tab in the background, and get the data of it. So we call fetch and the base URL. And in a way, that's it, but it gets a bit more complicated when you want to read the data. To read the data, you can see this creates a new entry in the network tab. Yeah, here. And then we have the preview. Yeah, we are getting the response correctly, but how do we read this response in our code? Well, we need to resolve the promise. So the fetch API gives us a promise. And so we need to resolve that promise. And promise help us work with asynchronous code, with code that is going to do stuff that take work. Because we cannot, like this fetch request might take 200 milliseconds, might take 3 seconds. We cannot block the browser while this fetch request is going in the background and doing stuff. And this is why promises were created. They let us run code, and then we can say, hey, when this is done, then you can do that. So that's why the fetch API is built on it. And here we will get back a response object. And if I console log it, it's a pretty big object that has many things, but doesn't really have the data that we want. It has the URL, the status, headers, the body. Maybe here it tells you it's a readable stream. So to read it, you want to tell the browser what to convert it to. We will start by converting it to text, but the text also gives you a promise. So we don't really get anything. So you can do a response.text. You can return it over here, and then do another .then, and then you will have the data. So this is telling the browser the response. So you made a fetch request, and the response you got back is text. So please convert it to text. And then this also returns a promise because the browser does it asynchronously. So think of it in the background. And now we can read the data over here, and you will get the data in text. But text would be pretty bad over here. Actually, we just want it as a JSON object. And JSON object is the JavaScript object notation. It's the way JavaScript can communicate with the server. It's a way to encrypt the JavaScript object and be able to send it to the server, but also receive it. And now reload the page, and you will just have actually a real object that you can work with. And why is this useful? Because we can now just immediately access the conversion rate by doing data.conversion_rate. Now reload the page, you'll get 0.8968. But what's really cool about this is that it's coming from the API, which means if I change this to CAD, we will get 1.3467. Go back. So yeah, that's really cool. And now the last thing we want to do then is that $1 in USD is equals to how many euros, and we want to update this number over here. So we will go to the HTML. Or you know what? Let's remove. Yeah. Okay. So where was it? 0 point here. So we want to only update. No, not this one. Sorry. Yeah, this one. Oh yeah, look, we want to update this twice. How do we do that? Yeah, let's start with the basic one. So we only want to update this. The euros we don't really have in the free API, so we have to do kind of like a simple version of it here. So I'll remove the currency for now. Ah, yeah, maybe we can say equal. We can just use symbols. So yeah, this we will make empty because we want to get the answer from the API, and then we will give it an ID. So we can select it. We call it result or rate, for example. And now we go over here. We go rate equals document.querySelector. Get your own API key at. Okay, query selector and then rate. And now we can here say the rate dot text content equals data dot conversion rate. And that's pretty much it. Ah, yeah, we can also add the currency next to it, but let's see. So yeah, $1 is equals to 0.8. Let's see this more in action. Select USD. This is going to give us 1. Select euro. This is also going to give us 1 because we use the same currency. And then select USD euro 0.89. And it's going to be 1.2 or 1.3. If we flip down to 1.1, really bad at math. And yeah, this is basically our basic app. But of course, this is far from complete because there are many issues with it. If I do this, the whole thing fails. We don't handle errors. Also, these values are hard-coded, the euro and the USD. Also here, they don't really make sense. So you would probably want to get the base and the USD from the URL. We want to have maybe an object storing all the emojis so we can populate that. But I'm just going to open up for questions now. Let's do two things. Let's open up for questions or feature requests. So what would you like us to improve? I want to do this if no one suggests anything. And maybe we can do these two also. So any questions, anyone? Catching errors in fetch requests might be helpful for others. Indeed, yep. So we can also, yeah, how do we make it fail? We can make it fail by passing a currency that doesn't exist, USDA, for example, and that gives us a bad request. Now, catching fetch requests. So yeah, if there's an error, how do we deal with it? This actually really depends on the API you're working with, because some APIs might, let's see, if I do .catch error. So this is a way to catch errors in a promise. Reload the page. No, yeah, sorry, that's not it here. So yeah, if you go back to logging the response and reload the page, you will see that here, oh yeah, sorry, I'm just gonna go back a bit over here. This console log confused me. Let's go back to console logging data and reload the page. And you see, even though there is an error, it's still going in the .then, not even in the .catch. So if I add the .catch, which usually handles errors, say console.error, there was an error, and you can also log the error. But here, from fetch point of view, the fetch request succeeded. And that's always confusing at the beginning, but it kind of makes sense. The fetch request succeeded. It was able to go to the URL and get the response. However, the API is telling us that we didn't call it correctly. And it gives us an object here, and you can see the information. But there's a better way to know that without checking the data object. You can see here console log response. there's a property called OK. So response.OK is false, whereas previously, actually look here, if I do USD, the response is OK is true. So you can wrap this a bit advanced, but you can say if the response.OK is false, so if not response.OK, we can throw an error, throw error, or just throw invalid API call. That's not really the best way to deal with it, but I'm gonna keep it as a light example here. And now we can say there was an error, and then the error is invalid API call. And then here you can handle the code, you can update the UI, you can show an error message or something.
That, would you mind opening up? I think the site is called HTTP statuses or status codes, just to see what the 400 that we get really means.
Not this one.
No, I didn't know about this. That's really cool. Bad request. Okay. If you paid close attention, you saw that on the successful request, there was a 200. And when we did the USDA was 400. HTTP cut, that's nice.
Yeah, basically the ones you really want to know about are 200. If you want to know like just 4, the 300 range are generally redirections related. And then the 404 everyone knows. I think even non-coders know, not found. And then the 400 means bad request, and that means we called the API in an incorrect way most of the times. And one more you should know about is 500. 500 means the server crashed, and that's generally internal server error. That's generally have to do with the server. However, keep in mind, if you pass some data that is very weird, you might be the reason why you crashed the server. In that case, congratulate yourself, but then you know that it's kind of, it will not be resolved until you correct the way you're calling it.
But perhaps we can simulate like a network error, so we can get into the cuts. So you can change the domain, so add like a Z or something in the URL. So if this doesn't exist, I think we'll get the
error name not resolved, failed to fetch. Yeah, then you get the failed to fetch, and you do not need to do this if for that. It will always go to the .catch. So by default, the .catch is only for network errors. But by adding this throw, you make it for all kind of errors.
And you can see, like everyone, you can see that on the console, we see the error message. There was an error, TypeScript failed to fetch, and there's also the line converter.js 23. So on the code on the right, you will see that line 23 is the actual console log that output, like displayed this message. So if you see this kind of things that can happen everywhere in your code, make sure to check the column number, which is the line in your file that's throwing this error. Because now the code is small enough, but if you have like thousands of code as in production, you really want to pay attention to the line number. So the 23, and then there's like 11. There was another thing went wrong there, and yeah. So just a tip.
And like you suggested, maybe we could try this, understand this error.
There's this like GPT-like now in Chrome. You can ask it question to understand the errors. Wow.
So it says it's either an incorrect URL, which is actually correct here, or course issues, which is when the API doesn't allow you to use it. It kind of blocks it. Server errors, network issues, blocked requests. Yeah, if you have an ad blocker. And yeah, actually, that's pretty cool. Verify the API URL, and you know it's incorrect. What if we do the USDA? Invalid API call, does it know? Yeah, I don't think it will know because that's my own error message, and it's not really... cool, the response, okay, check. They actually do send the code with it. Nice. Yeah, missing parameters. Yeah, it's not really gonna know why, but it's quite helpful to read it. So yeah, that's kind of nice.
Rate limiting. Wow, it's really, really good. It shows all the edge cases that...
Yeah.
Nice. So this is the kind of like Gemini
Yeah.
chat assistant in Chrome. It might not be available in your area or in your country. They're actually deploying this on various countries. So maybe if you check it on your own machine, it's not available.
Then just wait a bit. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
should be. Great. Well, then, if there are no questions, I would really like to do this one. Let's construct the URL by doing the opposite of the converter. Here, I've actually never done it, but let's see. I think you can try it here. So const URL equals new URL, and I think you can pass it empty. No, we do want to have the converter.js.html. It actually has to be a full URL. So it has to be, oh, that's going to be tricky then. So document.location, and we want to get the URL just without the page. Oh, that's going to be, okay. We can do it, but I guess that's going to be too convoluted. So that's going to be .path name. No. Yeah, just the href actually. So we get the href. I'll do it a bit quickly because that's probably too, we split it based on the last, on the slash, and then we want to remove the last one. No, that's too, oh yeah. So we want, so this gives us parts. This gives us all the parts. So I split the URL based on the slashes. No, sorry, that's going to be too messy. Yeah, but because here we have the HTML and then beginner. So I will hard code it for now, okay? So we'll do const URL equals new URL, and this is like not a good idea, but just for now, 8080, then HTML beginner, and then we will say converter.html. But ideally, this would be a variable, and then we would not have HTML beginner, and it will be okay. Then you can do search params.set, right? Base. I hope this works. Ah, no, there's no set because it's search params. Set, yes. Base and then USD. And then URL.search params.set target euro, for example. And now this is your URL object and it has these search parameters. So now we can convert it to a string or we can just read the href, I think. So URL.href. And now you have this URL. Yeah, you have this URL with all the URL parameters, but it turned out to be, I think, too overcomplicated. So let's leave it like this. Okay, any other questions or feature requests?
I think another, but I guess as a comment for now, like above line 29, you can add a comment. I think it's preferable to use the history API for like redirecting instead of the window location. So that's another thing that you might want to check out. I don't remember like the API, but yeah, something like that.
But that will be that will not take us to the other page, and we kind of need the HTML from the other page, so that will not work here. So data, and then this is actually unused. This was a really bad API. And then converter. So yeah, look, if I do converter.html, or yeah, URL, sorry. Yeah, let's just do converter.html. And I reload the page. Yeah, I click. It's gonna update the URL, but it's not gonna take me to the actual other page. And that works with single page apps, but here we have sorry.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
We have a multiple page app, so that will actually not work here.
Maybe there's an option or something. Yeah, okay.
Okay, let's do your suggestion then. Check if the base and target are the same. So we can say if base equals target, then we can start with an alert. It's not really recommended to use alert in production, but ideally we would want to show an error message here, for example, or here. Yeah, let's do that. Let's add the home track exchange rate. Here we can show PID error. and as a quick style, color red. And then we create this element here, const error equals document. Where select error. And now we can say, okay, error.text content, please select different currencies. Now try it, euro. It works, but it also takes us to the other page. I don't know if you quickly saw it. And this is where we can do something else. We can have the, we just don't want to run this code anymore. So you can have a return false, return undefined, just return. You want to quit the function. You want to exit the function. So reload the page, euro. Please select different currencies. But now we have another mistake, which is, and this is why people use frameworks, because of these issues that we don't have to handle anymore, which is if I select two different currencies, it's actually here, it's acceptable because the error message still stays there, but we are being redirected, so we don't see it. So yeah, that's how we select if the base and target are the same. But now there's another problem. If I select nothing, it fails, and we can use the optional chaining here. And if I reload, I think this is going to work, but it's not really ideal because it says select different currencies. We can then specifically check if base is undefined, or if there's no base, or there's no target. We can just show an error message that says error.text content, please select the base and the target currency. Trying to make like shorter error messages here and return. And that's how we handled both cases. So here, please select the base and the target currency. We select the base. We still have the same error. We can kind of separate them, but that's just going to create extra code for now. If I select both the same, and then it works.
Awesome. And I think that's a great lesson, especially to people that are just entering the JavaScript or the front-end scene, is that usually, I mean, the experience is that you go through an application and you code let's say the normal process where everything works in, let's say, X amount of time, and then you almost spend like more like than half the time in handling edge cases. So you check the base and the target currency, it works, you see like the conversion, and that's like you finishing like the basic, let's say, normal process. And then you have to think of all these edge cases, like missing base or target, missing both of them or missing one of them, then being the same, then like having a network error, or having like an error, a server error, or having like a rate limiting or authentication error. So all these make up a lot of code, a lot of like UX that you need to do, like give the user a really nice experience. Like I think you mentioned it, like it's not the best experience to say base or target is missing. If they just miss the base, you should show the methods base missing, target missing, or both of them. So that makes up a lot of like the development time and a lot of time just thinking and predicting what might go wrong. So in production, we spend like, let's say, 10 hours building the main, let's say, app, doing the things normally, and then we spend almost half the time, double the time in making sure that we handle all edge cases and everything that might go wrong. So we barely touch the surface in this project. And I think it would be a nice exercise for everyone to just handle all these things and give the user the best experience possible.
And if you, after this call, I'm gonna also send the code, or maybe just push it to the GitHub repository. No, I shouldn't. I can send it to you, but we shouldn't push it, because if people want to practice it, they want to have we push it under a solution folder or something. But yeah, if you want to also try it yourself, you can set up the project with Vite, create an account. Sorry, and then we have the instructions on how to do the data currency, how to read it. Yeah, we could have disabled the button, by the way. Another way would be to disable the button until the user selects 2 currencies. That's also another way. And then, yeah, there's even more instructions. Basically, it's pretty similar to what I've done. We also use this one is using a link rather than a button. And a link actually would be more appropriate. So that's also ChatGPT who's created the button. We also have URL search parameters, and then we have the fetch. And yeah, it shows your API key. So yeah, there's really all the instructions. And there's also optionals. So you can convert this to TypeScript. You can implement a refresh button. You could add currency flags using emojis. And yeah, this is exactly what we talked about. Don't allow the user to select target currency before selecting a base. That's actually different. Or selecting the same currency. And there's even instructions on deploying it, but to Netlify or GitHub pages. And if you finish all of that, you can go back and do it on the advanced mode. I'm just not going to go over it, which is actually a lot more, not a lot, a bit more advanced, but it would be cool. But if it's your first time, please go with the beginner first.
We are going to share these links like the GitHub repo, the resources that you will probably need to go through, like all these APIs, the URL, the dataset, optional chaining. We're going to share them through LinkedIn and through our YouTube channel, and through also, Jad, you can share it through your like social media or any accounts that you might be using, so people can find them. If you feel that if you think that there's something that we should add in the repository, you can open them, like leave an issue or send us an email or something. I think we should keep the solution out of the repository so people can actually try the code, and
Sure.
that's the whole point of this. I don't know if there are any questions, comments, feedback, suggestions from the audience, from the participants. Please let us know.
I'm going to remove the data emoji because I think it will confuse someone if you don't use it.
Also, since you mentioned it, a good thing is that like I don't think that was recorded, but we use ChatGPT to bring the Figma designs and let ChatGPT create like the HTML just to skip the HTML creation part. And you saw that it made like a really bad job in creating an HTML that's not accessible, that's
Semantics.
not really, probably
yeah.
not validated. So one thing you should do is, like, first of all, you can manually create it, or at least review the code. And another thing that you can do is you can provide these details in ChatGPT. Like, you get an output, and then you can say, please rewrite the code using accessibility, best practices. Make sure that is validated. You can use the W3C validation. So as you put more information and extra like instructions to ChatGPT, it does a better job in any kind of code. So don't just accept the first response or the first result. Review the code, review the response that you get from ChatGPT, and then come back with more like additional instructions or suggestions or things that will improve the next response. So that's a good tip on when using this AI agent. And
Indeed.
Very careful.
It did actually generate valid HTML. This is probably from my Prettier extension. Prettier is unfortunately the default settings for Prettier is not really in line with the W3C recommendation, but it's an info. It's not a big deal. These extra slashes, but if I remove it and save, it's going to be back. That's because of Prettier. I think they also don't even have an option to disable it. There was a big thread and a lot of angry people on that thread. But yeah, I think it generally does really valid code, but semantics, it's hard for it to know that. It would make sense as a button if you're doing the fetch request here, but because we are redirecting to another page, it would need to be an anchor, but indeed it doesn't have access to this information.
Great, that's awesome.
I
Let us
removed the
know.
API key. Yeah.
Let us know what you think. If you have any questions.
Yeah, I think you're referring mostly to the home.js, where we have this function that just is called init-selector and does not do anything else. It doesn't initiate the selector and gives us the value. It's only initiating the selector. And you also mentioned try to make class to do too many things. Yeah, indeed. Okay, nice. Single associate class and combining selectors. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by combining selectors more in targeting the DOM. I think you're referring to this part here, like this one, where we were quite specific. We said we are looking for the element that has both classes, currency button and selected, and that's the syntax for it. And it's also a child of .base currencies. Yeah, but sorry, yeah, indeed. Did we create another function? Yeah, and the converter, it was really procedural this time. Like we didn't really create much functions, but yeah, if I were to wrap this in a function, it's going to be called init. It's just a very small tutorial. Yeah.
One more thing I should add is if you go to the home.js code. So depending, of course, on your experience, like if you scroll up a little bit, I think there's, yeah. So one thing that you should try is, I would suggest is, instead of just chaining functions together, like we call document query selector all, and we get back a value, and then we call for each on that value, and maybe we chain. So if you want to practice and learn more about this, you should split each step into a single statement, store this first step in a variable, like currencies document query selector all, console log the currencies to see what you get back from this first function call, and then move on to say currencies dot for each. So chaining might be a good thing if you're like experienced, but if you're starting or if you want to explore more about what's happening in each step, it's better that you split its step in a single statement, store it in a variable, console log it. I call this the X-ray technique. So X-ray every single thing that happens through a variable and then move on to the next step. Otherwise, there will be like a lot of things happening chained together, and then if something goes wrong, or probably if you never heard about these functions before, you don't know what happens at its step. So break things down so that you explore and learn more about its function. In this case, for example, target document query selector should stop there. So get the target, see what's in there, and then say target dot dataset, and maybe dataset dot currency code. So split its step so that you can see what its property gives us back, or what its function gives us back, to understand a bit more. Once if you're experienced with these things, you can chain them and you can quickly get the whole thing in one go, or you can split this up and actually do a better debugging job if something goes wrong. So that would be one of my let's say advice.
When you talked about the X-ray here, if you don't want to console log both the base and the target, well, two tips. First, you can do console log base and target, and you can wrap them with curly braces, and that's gonna be the same as base target. It's an ES6 feature, which is basically you're giving the name of the variable before it. You'll see it as an object. So let's take a look here. Base target. But I don't really want to redirect, so I'm gonna return temporarily. You get an object with base and a target, because if you have many variables, you will not know which one is relating to which one. But the shorter way of writing it is when the key is the same as the variable, there's the value in terms of name, you can drop one of them and reload the page. And now look, you have base target, they're the same. Yeah, you can see them. Or you can also use the debugger. it's generally, it has a bit of overhead. So while we should use it more than console log, I think we all use console log a lot. And I don't think that's wrong. But when you have like 4 or 5 variables you want to log, the debugger is pretty good. Reload the page. Once you want to use it, it's going to pause it. Also, the first time the UI might be confusing, and you want to go to the scope on the bottom right, and you'll see all the variables in your scope here. You don't need to log them. You can see all of them, which is pretty cool. Then you want to press play to continue the code. And you want to remove it when you're done, of course.